大家好，今天是圣诞前夜啊，祝大家圣诞快乐。我们已经1周没有更新节目了，我知道很多朋友在问啊，我没有问题啊，只是呢最近我有一些私事啊，我最早在今天晚上，最晚在明天呢会恢复我们的节目更新啊，但是今天呢我们会给大家推送一个我在今年年中的时候啊，6月1号去墨西哥去参观这个墨西哥大选的时候呢，采访了墨西哥当地一个大牛。这个是一个南美的著名的经济学家，名字叫 Enrique Dussel Peters 啊，恩里克·杜塞尔·彼得斯是墨西哥最高学府墨西哥自治大学经济学学院的教授，扛把子教授。但是这个人呢，也是非常著名的啊，你可以说是类似于大外宣级别的，中共在南美的大外宣级别的这样一个学者啊，他对于中国在南美的这个投资啊，包括中共官方在南美投资呢，是推崇备至，接受过中国几乎所有的重要的媒体以及最高学府的演讲邀请或者采访请求。哎，这次呢，我去墨西哥，我一个反贼还就真跟他聊上了。我们俩母语都不是英文，但是呢，我觉得在整个这个1个多小时的聊天里面呢，你会发现呢。还是有一些非常有意思的碰撞的，包括呢对于现在如日中天的阿根廷总统米莱的看法。在半年以前，米莱那个时候还刚刚开始改革，是吧？现在我们已经看到结果了，但是我们可以回过去看一下半年以前这个南美的亲共的大经济学家是怎么看待一些中国跟美洲跟美国相关的问题的。
Hi, Professor Peters. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And you are one of the leading economics here in Latin America, and you're one of the strongest, or the strongest, advocate for China's FDI in Latin America. And I am just an independent YouTuber from Australia. And I'm to be honest, I'm pretty critical of the Chinese government and their way of governing. How did you agree to this interview?
Look, based on the work we do on Latin America, or from Latin America on China, we always highlight you can study China from within China, from Berlin, New York, or from Mexico City, and you come up with different results. No, we have been working for 20 plus years on lots of topics. No,
yeah.
We have a 700-member network on Latin America, of Latin American academics on China, from history, architecture, and whatever. No, lots of results.
Yeah.
And the more we work on China, the less we understand. And I always say, look, it is very easy to put an adjective to the results. It's authoritarian, it's feasible, whatever. That's easy.
Yeah.
The difficult part is to do the work. So we do lots of works on different topics: empirical work, methodological work, conceptual work, and we have discussions and debates. No?
Yeah.
Imagine in this academic network, 700 members, lots of people are closer to China, others are very critical to China,
yeah.
with people from Taiwan,
okay.
Whatever. So again, we invite people from the US Embassy, no? And we have people from communist parties in Cuba, in Venezuela, in China,
wow.
etc. No?
Okay.
So welcome to a very heterogeneous discussion. Again, the most difficult part is to do the work. Putting an adjective to the result, that's the easy part. We are very proud to have a very open environment, which is very difficult to do, even in the United States, in China, and in other parts of the world. We have historical discussions on Taiwan. No? Yeah. We have invited the representative of Taiwan here. We have, since 2005, imagine we do every 2 weeks a cycle of conferences, hundreds of topics, 350 conferences on whatever you can imagine. These kinds of discussions and debates are increasingly difficult, even in the US and in China. No? Again, I have my own opinion, I do my own research. Sometimes I don't agree with the results of the conferences, but that's irrelevant.
But we all agree to disagree. Like that's our human rights.
But again, with serious research, no?
Yes.
We do not invite someone that started doing research last weekend and then he comes up with I don't know what kind of revolutionary. China is increasingly fashionable. Latin America and China too, so you have to discriminate and you have to be a little bit careful on who do you invite, and we do research on the people we invite, etc. So I don't mind if you are for or against or whatever. That's the easy part.
Great. That's also my way. Okay. Yeah, we just always open to dialogues with anybody else. So could you elaborate on your views? Because your views are quite famous here in Latin America, but not in the Chinese-speaking world. Could you elaborate on your views regarding China's investment in Latin America?
Well, we've been working for more than 10, almost 15 years on China's investment in Latin America and in Mexico. No? We have been working at the macroeconomic level, at the mesoeconomic level, which means the public and private institutions in China and Latin America that work on the issues of FDI, foreign direct investment, in the attraction enhancement, and we work also at the micro level. Dozens of case studies from Argentina to Mexico, experiences, some successful, some less successful. No? And in the last 8 years now, we have been publishing a monitor of Chinese investments in Latin America, because what we have noticed is that China's MOFCOM, the Ministry of Commerce, but also Latin America's MOFCOM, they have different names from Argentina, Brazil, Ecuador. What we have noticed is that they have different methodologies to register Chinese FDI flows, no? And so statistics matter. And so what we have been doing since 2017 is an annual publication in Chinese, in Spanish and in English, an annual publication regarding the flow, Chinese FDI flows to Latin America by country, the employment it generates, the sector, the name of the Chinese firm, etc., etc. And this has generated a lot of interest, among other things also. Why? Because the statistical differences with China's MOFCOM, but also with Latin American public sources, are enormous. So just to give you an example, no? According to Mexico's Secretaría de Economía, the Mexico's MOFCOM, no? Mexico has received from China an accumulated investment from China until 2023, almost $2.5 billion, no? 2.5.
Yeah. Private and public.
From China.
Yeah.
No? According to our statistics that we do at the transaction level, and we work hundreds of hours and we go transaction by transaction, this is only realized FDI, not announcements, no? And we check and we speak with the firms, etc., with the embassies, etc. We come up not with 2.5 billion, but with almost 23 billion. 800% more. No? What is the reason for this? The reason is not that China's MOFCOM is lying or that Mexico's Secretaría de Economía is lying, but the reason is we use different methodologies. If Huawei from Shenzhen invests through San Diego, for whatever administrative reason, the Mexican Secretaría de Economía registers this as a U.S. investment.
Oh, okay.
Not as a Chinese one. Why? Because it comes from San Diego in California.
Yeah.
The work we do, I don't care where it comes from. If it comes from the Cayman Islands, from Luxembourg, or from San Diego, I know Huawei is a Chinese firm, and we locate this transaction in our data set. So we go transaction by transaction. Lots of work, I can assure you, and the differences are enormous. So we do a very detailed analysis. It has generated a lot of interest, even in China. I publish once a month or a little bit more in the China Daily in China and in other Chinese media, and they have allowed us to use this kind of data, although the differences are again very substantial. I always highlight there are no liars, but different methodologies. No?
Yeah.
And the results are the results allow for a much deeper understanding of Chinese investment in Latin America, including issues such as employment, sectors, trends in the last 20 years, etc. No?
Like how effective the investment has been.
Look, I would tell you 2 or 3 relevant trends. No, Chinese investments have generated in Latin America almost 700,000 jobs, no? Which is not irrelevant for the region. Differences by country. Brazil is the most important recipient. And the second, I would tell you, logo or important trend is that at least in the last 5 years, China's investments have diversified very importantly. Historically, Brazil was the #1 recipient. In some years, it accounted for almost 100% of China's investment.
Yeah.
What we're witnessing in the last 5 years is that Chinese firms are learning, Latin American firms, but also the public sectors are learning. And so the diversification is by country. Brazil is still the most important country, but suddenly you have countries such as Chile, Peru, and particularly Mexico, that have increased their share in China's investment, very important. Diversification. And secondly, I would highlight a diversification of China's investment also by sector. Historically, in the first decade until 2015, 2017, most of Chinese investment went to raw materials, no? Oil, gas, even fish meal and issues like this. In the last 5 years, associated with this diversification by country, what we have is a deeper understanding of Chinese firms of Latin America, and so Chinese firms are increasingly investing in Latin America, for having access to the respective domestic markets. No? So you have suddenly more investments in manufacturing, in the banking sector, in the distribution of energy, etc. And B, also as an export platform to other places of Latin America and the world, including the United States. Again, Mexico here is an outlier, because most of Chinese investment are in the last 5 years have concentrated in manufacturing. Mexico does not have the raw materials of Brazil, Chile, Peru, Argentina, among others. And Mexico has, 40 years of experience. We have 14 FTAs with 50 countries. And so not only the United States, not only Canada in NAFTA or the USMCA, but also to Central America, to South America, to Europe, to Japan, etc. No? So again, the catchword of diversification is very important, because what we have been witnessing in discussions with colleagues in China, but also in the US and the European Union, is that in most of the cases they come up with results and discussions that are completely outdated. No? So again, this last monitor has information until 2023. Not 2013. No? And based on this data, we can discuss very clear trends by sector, by country, employment generation, etc. No?
Can I assume that what's pushing this diversification of investments is the U.S. tariff against China?
No.
Because you said it's starting from...
This might be more relevant in Mexico, but again, Mexico is one country within Latin America. So you will find different reasons for investing in Brazil, in Argentina, in Ecuador, or in Mexico. The specific case of Mexico is relevant, yes. I highlighted the case of Mexico in the last 5 years as one country that is receiving more and more Chinese investment. But again, for both reasons, for having access to Mexico's domestic market. Mexico has a population of 140 million. It's not completely irrelevant, no? And of course, yes, Mexico is highly export-oriented, no? What is very important here in the discussions that have been going on in the last weeks, no? And in the electoral debate in the United States, is that China has been investing in Latin America for 20 years, and also in Mexico. The problem is that, well, the so-called think tanks in Washington, D.C., I always say they are neither think nor tanks, but we call them think tanks. The quality of the research on Latin America and China, on the rest I don't know, but the quality of the research is very bad. So D.C. senators, House of Representatives, the White House, etc., are very ill prepared and do not understand very well what is going on between Latin America and China for 20 years. And so they have come up suddenly with the topic, China is using our backdoor, Mexico and other countries, and we have to try to contain, to limit, and we don't want to see China in Latin America and particularly Mexico. I would say this recognition and acknowledgement is too late.
It's too late?
Too late, yes. Why? Because China has been investing in Latin America and Mexico for 20 plus years.
But the investment just increased sharply in 2022 or 2020?
No, in the last 5 years.
Last 5 years, yeah.
5 years.
Like I said,
Not
although
in the last weekend.
Although it's been going for 20 years, but the last 5 years is like a very sharp increase.
Yes, but again, you have to understand. Imagine telecommunications. No? 80% of cellular telecommunications works through Huawei. 80%. If you want to limit or get rid of Chinese investment and of Huawei, well, we cannot use cellular phones. Last year, 25% of new sales in cars, automobiles, not electric vehicles, but normal fossil energy cars, 25% were Chinese brands. So if you want to get rid suddenly of China, this does not understand that, again, the relationship between Mexico and China and Latin America and China is a very mature relationship. No? This is not a new relationship. No?
I was in India actually 3 weeks ago, because they have this election too, at the same time, and they don't have Huawei there. They don't have TikTok. They ban all the Chinese apps. But they, to be honest, they do have all the other Chinese brands, mobile phones. So
again, this is not being for China or against China. This is simply a fact-driven acknowledgement of what has been going on in the last 25 years. No? Again, as a result of the discussion in the United States, in which one of the few coincidences between the Democratic and the Republican Party is to be very strongly anti-Chinese. No? There is a competition of who is more anti-Chinese. No? So the Biden administration imposed 100% tariffs against Chinese electric vehicles, and the reaction of the Republican Party was, you are weak against China, tariffs should be much higher.
200%.
No?
Trump
Or
says 200, 300.
whatever. No? So that's the competition. No? Who is more anti-Chinese? This is not today in Mexico or in Latin America. No? And again, there has been an ongoing process of integration between China and Latin America, far beyond economics. In culture, Confucius Institutes, exchanges. UNAM has a very strong exchange with Chinese students, no? Mexicans going to China, Chinese coming here, etc. So trying to get rid of China, as some discussions in Washington, D.C., they do not understand what has been going on for 20 years.
Yeah, a lot of things you just mentioned is very interesting is in my list of questions. But let's talk about the tariff Biden administration has just recently slapped to Chinese products. Like I said, Trump has they both promised to target Chinese products manufactured in Mexico. How do you think they will implement this? How do you think they can stop Chinese products manufactured in Mexico to be imported into the United States?
Well, first, they in the United States, again, they do not have a clear understanding of what has been going on in the last 20 years, not in the last weekend, which means we have lots of detailed investments in auto parts, automobiles, electronics, telecommunications that have been integrated in Mexican production and in Mexican exports in general, also to the United States. No? So you have, if you look at some of the work we have been doing, from conferences to the micro level analysis, you have dozens of Chinese firms in the last 15 years in auto parts that do windshields, that do harnesses, that do tires production in Mexico, and they are integrated in a car that says made in Mexico, which, with parts and components from Germany, from the United States, little but increasingly also from Chinese firms in Mexico. This is not illegal. This is 100% considered within NAFTA and since 2020 in the USMCA. So you have to measure at the end a car with thousands of components, and you have to measure the regional value added. And depending on the specific product, it might be a cellular phone, or it might be a monitor, or it might be a car, which is more fashionable today. Well, if you have 75% of regional value added, you don't pay tariffs. If you have less of that, you pay 2, 3, 5% tariffs. This is completely conceived within the USMCA. The problem is that the profound confrontation between the United States and China, and all this discussion of getting rid of China, Chinese firms, investments, and whatever in the United States, not only economically, also of Confucius Institutes. No? More than 100 Confucius Institutes, because they don't want Chinese spies. No? I was a visiting professor at the University of Pittsburgh in 2020 and witnessed this process. No? I think this is pretty much of an overreaction, but well, take it as you want to. No? But so, again, this process of Mexico is the world champion of importing parts and components from the world. It might be a computer, it says made in Mexico, but again, the value added produced and fabricated in Mexico is very low. We import from Taiwan, from China, from Singapore, maybe from Australia, a lot from the United States, and you end up with a product or service that says made in Mexico. No? So Mexico would not have any problems, and this is completely embedded in the discussion and the negotiations of the USMCA. The problem is that suddenly in the electoral discussion in the United States, suddenly candidate Biden, not President Biden, but the candidate Biden and candidate Trump, they jump beyond USMCA and they say, we're going to impose tariffs against China, 100% on electric vehicles, and Mexico, I hope you will do the same. And if you do not the same, I'm going to impose tariffs on your exports to the United States.
Are they going to renegotiate the deal, USMCA maybe?
Well, the thing is that there is no discussion. Both candidates
There's no discussion now about that.
Are leaving aside USMCA and are suddenly directly threatening Mexico. Either you engage in our strategy against China, or you will pay the consequences. And I would say from the academic sector, and what about the USMCA? All these discussions are completely considered within the USMCA. Both candidates don't care about the USMCA and saying, Mexico, either you comply and you engage in our strategy against China, or you will pay the consequences. No?
So basically, they're asking you to raise tariffs on Chinese import from China.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that was step one. But the same day, the Secretary of Commerce, Tai, discussed openly, this is not a policy yet, that the US is seriously thinking of imposing a general tariff on Mexican imports.
Oh, wow. That's going to be big.
And you would say, excuse me, what is your research? What is your diagnostics? How did you come up with this idea? Why? And is there a particular reason? Well, we have the suspicion. They have the suspicion again that Mexico might be exporting products to the United States with Chinese inputs. That's completely integrated within the USMCA. But they are not using the USMCA, but they want to impose unilaterally tariffs to China, to Mexico, and to other countries. This is a very dangerous road, no? Because the founder of the World Trade Organization, the United States, is suddenly saying, you know what, I will not use the World Trade Organization, I will not use the USMCA, I have my own national security agenda. And so tomorrow, Mexico might say, you know what, I don't want to import coffee from Guatemala, so I'm going to raise a tariff of 100%. And the day after tomorrow, Australia might say, you know what, I don't want to import wine from France, 100%. And we will very quickly get to the 1920s and 1930s.
That is exactly what the Chinese government have been doing to Australia.
Well, welcome to I am not aware of the details of the discussion between Australia and China, but what we are witnessing in Latin America and Mexico are unilateral steps going beyond all the institutional framework that has been negotiated for decades. No? Very surprising. No?
Do you think that the WTO system is breaking apart?
Well, again, the founder of the WTO is saying, I will not use the rules of the WTO. Strictly speaking, the imposition of massive tariffs by Trump in 2020, of Biden 10 days ago, etc., are not legal. They are not part of the World Trade Organization framework.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because their narrative is like China is not is breaking all the rules of a WTO system. So we have to negotiate a trade deal with China, but China don't want to do that. So we have to do something about it. You know what I mean? They say that China is the first one who's breaking all the rules.
Well, again, in a conflict, it's very difficult to say who shot or used for the first time the gun.
Yeah.
If you have a war, who started? You started because I saw you, and no, you saw me. That's irrelevant. No?
Okay.
But what we are witnessing today is a discussion in the United States, not in China, but in the United States, in which they are saying we are not going to comply with the World Trade Organization rules.
How is the Obrador administration is dealing
That's
with
the founder
Yeah,
of the WTO.
I understand.
It's
Yeah,
not any small island lost I don't know where.
Yeah.
It's the founder of this 80 years ago. So this is serious stuff.
Yeah.
And countries such as Mexico, but also in Central America and other parts, are feeling this very difficult situation. No? And particularly from in the last weeks until November, where you will have elections in the United States.
Yeah.
And so the big threat for the US is China, and I humbly believe they are using Mexico as a scapegoat. No? It's very easy to blame everybody, China, Mexico. No? Of course, the king or the queen, they never like to see themselves in front of a mirror. And you know what? Your competitiveness is doing very badly. No? But the queen never likes to say, the queen is naked. You have a problem. What has happened in the last 20 years regarding competitiveness in the United States? Why is China today producing electric vehicles and you are having enormous problems?
Yeah, they made a strategic mistake.
So this discussion is not going on. They are simplifying, finding people to blame, countries, China, Mexico, tomorrow I don't know who. I do not see a serious discussion regarding U.S. competitiveness.
Yeah. I agree with that, actually. I agree with that.
So Mexico as a scapegoat, to say, Mexico, behave, don't you dare to integrate parts and components from China to your exports to the US. But Mexico has been doing this for 20 plus years. As a matter of fact, I remind you, many of Mexican exports today to the United States were transferred from the United States to Mexico using Chinese components.
Yeah.
20 years ago, 10 years ago, and suddenly Biden and Trump are saying, we don't want it. Difficult.
Let's think from like United States perspective. Don't you think that Mexico is one of the biggest beneficiary of this U.S.-China tension? Because like I said, Trump administration's tariff push a lot of investments into Mexico, right, from China.
Yes, it's fashionable to say Mexico is the main benefactor of this conflict between the US and China and the trade war.
Yeah.
Yes and no. There are different countries. Vietnam has been benefiting too, all other Asian countries.
India.
Among others. And I remind you, Mexico is the world champion in importing parts and components.
Yeah.
We have been working on this for a long time. Case studies, specific global value chains in auto parts, automobiles, etc., etc. But the main weakness of Mexico is that we don't produce parts and components.
Okay.
This is a huge advantage in being or investing in China. No? I always say jokingly, if you want to manufacture a shirt, a T-shirt, no,
Yeah.
And in Mexico you forgot to import the buttons, you have to wait for a month to import the buttons from Miami. No, this does not happen in China. No?
Okay.
So. I'm joking about this, but Mexico, contrary to other cases in Asia, particularly China, the domestic value added in Mexico for producing parts and components is extremely weak. And so what we have witnessed in auto parts, automobiles, but also in the footwear global value chain, based on field research, no, with business organizations. Imagine the situation. So you suddenly have interested people from the United States interested in investing in Mexico in footwear. We want to produce 1 million of boots or whatever you want to. Okay, we have the labor power to do it. Okay, so what about your supplier system? We don't have a supplier system. So what do? Well, we import from China. So we want to get rid of China in order to invest in Mexico. But if we invest in Mexico, we are still highly dependent on China. Decisions are not easy, again, as a result of this weak supplier system and weak production of parts and components. No? So it's not a one-side story where Mexico has dramatically benefited. Yes, Mexico has received new investments, but again, always with the threat from the United States. No? I've been working and discussing the topic of security shoring against this fashion of nearshoring, and you ask someone, what is this nearshoring about? And they don't know anything. It's the relocation of transactions. So, but this has been going on for 80 years. What we're witnessing today is since 2022, 2023, with Jake Sullivan, Janet Yellen, the White House is highlighting national security in the United States is the main topic against China. And so Mexico, are you going to integrate in my security shoring strategy against China or not? And so this is getting very serious for countries such as Mexico, but also for Vietnam and many others. No? Imagine, Tesla announced March of last year a gigafactory in Monterrey where you are going. No? Yeah. This will very probably not happen because of problems of Tesla, lack of competitiveness with BYD and many others. But well, so $5 billion in Monterrey. No? But what has come up since then, again, so far it has been an announcement that probably will not result in a plant, but maybe yes. But as a result of this security shoring, the Biden administration has been very clear. Any electric vehicle that will come out from that plant will not have any Chinese parts and components. Any.
Wow.
If you include any parts and components from China, you will not have access to the subsidy that the United States is giving, $7,500 per electric car.
But I think Tesla invited two Chinese parts manufacturers.
Of course, but this is why very probably this will not work out. We don't. If you have parts and components, imagine a battery that's the core of the electric. No battery, no harnesses, no windshields, no nothing. If you have parts and components from China, you will not receive the subsidy from the U.S. government. If Tesla does not receive the subsidy, the gigafactory does not make any sense. So our friends from Tesla are seriously thinking, what the hell are we going to do? Again, they are having their own problems, and I don't think this will happen. But again, under the heading of security shoring is, I don't want to see Chinese firms in Mexico, Confucius Institutes and then Huawei and nothing. No? This is the mood in Washington increasingly. No? And this is putting Mexico in an awkward position because Mexico has always had a very liberal law on foreign direct investment. If a Swiss cheese producer wants to fabricate cheese in Mexico, the Mexican law, we don't ask. And from which political party are you? Who cares? Are you from the extreme right or extreme left? And what are your components? And we don't care about this, and we don't have the instruments to know these issues. The United States is increasingly blackmailing Mexico. We want you to copy and paste our laws and instruments so that you know if the investment comes from a communist party, it is related to a public sector. Today we don't know about it. And to be frank, we don't care.
From my perspective, that's what China has been doing to Japan, Australia, blackmailing. Like if you don't give us something, then we'll ban their products, things like that. So, comes to Mexico with.
But this is putting Mexico in a very difficult situation.
Of course.
And the United States, Janet Yellen was in December of last year in Mexico, inviting, not to say blackmailing Mexico, to say, my friends, either you integrate to this security shoring or you will have problems. No? This is not being for China or against China, but this is simply to argue from a Latin American and Mexican perspective, something is cooking, and it is increasingly difficult in Mexico and in other countries to witness this clash between these two giants. And so far, Mexico has never had Bolsonaro or Milei against China or very close to the United States. We've always tried to meddle with both.
Yeah.
This is getting tough.
Yeah, I understand. Everybody senses that. Everybody's sensing that. Yeah.
No?
It's so hard to pick a side, to not picking a side during a war, right?
It's not picking a side, but it's simply trying to work with both parts. No? Mexico has 50 plus years of diplomatic ties with China, and we have worked pretty well with China, knowing that the US is the main point of reference for Mexico. This has worked out. But again, what in these electoral debates and until November, the mood is completely anti-Chinese, no? And increasingly using third countries such as Mexico as a scapegoat. Don't you dare, Mexico. No?
Obviously, you think that no matter Trump or Biden win the next election, nothing will be changed from the United States end.
Whoever wins, they will continue with this conflict. Again, because the U.S. is the old rich guy in town. No? China is the new rich guy in town, and the confrontation is getting very tough at all levels, at the university level, at the research level, at the cultural level, at the planes level, no, even tourism. No, I always used San Francisco and the U.S. West Coast to travel to China. That has practically disappeared. No?
Yeah.
So it's at all levels that this confrontation is going on, and this will not be limited or will not disappear.
Yeah.
No? Very unfortunately.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Mexican election. So the results of this Mexican election will make it different to how Mexican government is going to handling the pressure from the United States.
The problem is that you have to imagine hundreds of people and political parties are discussing these topics. Not the case. There is practically no discussion on these issues in the political parties, by the political candidates. Economic issues in general have been very weak, and zero on China and the United States. No discussion on this. So,
does that mean the voters don't care?
They have not been informed. If you want to, it might be a discussion which is a little bit more specialized, you need a little bit more of patience, and so it is much easier to say, we want to generate 1 million jobs, and everybody claps and says, yes, we are for this candidate. If you say, you know what, the Biden administration is doing that, and there is China, and so we have, I prefer 1 million jobs, no?
Okay.
So no discussion on this topic, not even by business organizations, which is very surprisingly, no? So the level of the analysis and discussion on these topics is very, very shallow and very poor, no? There is, I would tell you, on these issues, on Chinese investment, what they are doing, how, etc., there is practically no one you can discuss these topics today.
Okay.
It might be very frustrating. Yes, it's very fashionable and people say, oh, very interesting. But you know what? We have different methodologies for measuring Chinese investment. There is no discussion on China for the election in 3 days. On China, what to do between China and the United States in this new triangular relationship, how to deal with this. So surprisingly, politically, this has been delegated to technical working groups at the 3rd, 4th level, which are taking very important decisions. No?
Okay.
So Janet Yellen was in December here of last year, and they decided to create a working group between the US Treasury and the Mexican counterpart. Complete secrecy. No?
Okay.
I have some contacts and have been trying to see, has this working group already been working, with what kind of results, what are they working on? Are they working on changing and reforming Mexico's FDI law? Do they want to generate instruments to know if, again, our investor from Switzerland, if he's from the extreme right or extreme left party? We don't know. But the implications of this will be substantial, because if the blackmail or invitation is, we want to know where these Chinese firms are they from which party, what are they doing, etc., etc. China, again, is the 2nd major trading partner of Mexico. No? So 50 years ago, China was irrelevant for Mexico. Today, the presence of China, as I've been arguing several times, is very important. So saying, you know what, my friends, I'm not going to allow for any kind of public investment from China to Mexico, this might have diplomatic repercussions, political repercussions, health repercussions. China was the only country that supported Mexico with masks, with vaccines and whatever during the COVID crisis, and of course economic repercussions. If we don't have Huawei today, we cannot use cellular phones. No? So it's not a matter of saying, you know what, I'm going to marry the United States and I'm going to quit my relationship with China. 20% of Mexican imports today come from China. 20%. It's not an easy question. No? This is why I highlight the economic relationship of Latin America and Mexico with China has been going on increasingly for 20 plus years, not last weekend. No? And this is not understood in Washington. No? They think that Mexico or Argentina or Brazil, that they can end their relationship with China on Monday. Many things would not work in Latin America without China, no?
Okay.
But again, welcome to a discussion. People that know little about this, they discuss, no, I want you to not to have any Chinese firms in Mexico. But we are renovating the full metro line in Mexico City by Chinese firms. If we don't do that, we would not have a metro system in Mexico City, which is being used by 15 million persons a day. are you going to help me, Washington, on this? Well, no, I can't help you because I don't have anyone, but I want you to close your relations with Chinese firms. And they are all public firms. No?
Yeah. This morning I watched a video from 2019 where you attended a forum with 4 other panelists. We're talking about investment, Chinese investment in Latin America. And one of the panelists raised a point that because it's often very difficult to distinguish government investment and private investment from China. It's getting harder and harder to differentiate that. That's why America has to do this like a blanket ban, trying to get Mexico or other countries to stop the investment from China. What do you think about that? Like, because that's to me, it seems to me, it looks like a TikTok. What TikTok has been doing, them doing to TikTok in the United States, because TikTok is a private company, right? But Chinese have a very strong leverage over TikTok, like what you can do, what you cannot do. So they're banning TikTok. I guess logic is the same.
But again, I've been working on these topics with published journal and newspaper articles on TikTok and plenty of other issues. I mean, the United States is creating unsustainable decisions. No, I mean, the accusation of the United States against TikTok is a suspicion. They cannot prove anything. So if you are going to close any firm that is investing or trading in the United States based on a suspicion, because they cannot prove anything, the suspicion is, since this is a Chinese firm, by the way, it's a private firm, as Huawei and many others, they could be transferring information to the Chinese government. Well, they could or they could not.
There's a law in China that's first you have to, if you're a private company, you have to give it all the data to the government. The second, you cannot reveal that the government is asking for.
Proven. There is no.
The law is there. The law is there. There's no such law in Mexico and the United States.
No, there is the National Security Agency, and with the Snowden case, this has been proven that an NSA in the United States has taken all the data of Huawei in the United States and other countries. This has been proven. There is proof on that. There is a suspicion that the firms such as TikTok could transfer the information to the Chinese government, the suspicion. But based on a suspicion, so you could accuse any Mexican, German, Australian firm based on the suspicion that they could provide information to the Australian government. That's a tough stance, because based on that, on a suspicion, you can have suspicions of whatever you want to. No? Does that mean that the United States will not allow any kind of investment of a Chinese firm based on this suspicion in the United States? And by the way, they will not allow any kind of Chinese supplier, because if you have a cellular phone and you are getting your supplies of the semiconductor from a Chinese firm, this will also not be allowed. Imagine the consequences for a computer, for whatever, based on a suspicion. No?
You don't think it's fair?
I think this is completely chaotic. This is politically incentivized, but it does not have any potential of having a real impact. Because again, today you are wearing probably socks and then pants and underwear from China, no? And from a security shoring perspective, any good or service coming from China, you could have the suspicion that this is a problem. If your socks will be used in the U.S. Army, and you have the suspicion that the Chinese firm might put a nail into your sock, What are you going to do with the main economy of the world, which is China, according to the IMF since 2016? What are you going to do? I think they are acknowledging a process 20 years too late.
So you don't care.
If you want to rationally try to follow these steps, you are going to end in a street that will close. No? It will be. How do you want to produce a car today not having any Chinese supplies? This is not possible today. Electric cars, impossible. Let's see what happens. No? I don't want any electric vehicles from China. Okay, so you know what? You will end up with Teslas costing twice what Chinese consumers are paying. Good luck.
I have two more questions.
Okay.
Yes. So the investment into China has turned negative for the first time since 1998, last year.
No, that's not true.
No, the investment, the FDI to China.
Yes, that's not true.
That's not true.
No.
You don't think?
Read this, and according to the United Nations, that's not true. No.
But we can see a very sharp decrease in
China
2023.
No. This was used by the Financial Times, but the institution that works worldwide, not only
It was
on China.
reported in China too.
Okay.
It was reported in China, Chinese media.
I can, according to UNCTAD, United Nations Commerce and Trade Department, there was a small fall on Chinese FDI, incoming investments, but it was of over 140 billion US dollars. No?
I mean the investment in China,
Yes,
into China.
Exactly, not negative. That's not true.
Okay. So, but because I'm from a Chinese background, I know that the property market in China is crumbling.
Of course.
It's definitely crumbling.
Of course.
And the debt issue is getting worse and worse every day.
Yes.
And the consumption, the private consumption is even worse. What if the Chinese economy has some kind of serious problem? Will that have an impact to the FDI in Mexico and Latin America? What would you do?
You have to imagine again, Chinese. You will find this in table.
Yeah.
What is it? Table 1 or table? Yes, table 2. No.
Table 2.
The percentage of Chinese investments in Latin America over the rest. No, for the most recent period, 2020, 2023, Chinese investment accounted for 10.6% of incoming investments for Latin America. So Latin America is receiving 90% of investments come from other parts of the world. So if Chinese investment fall by 10% or fall completely, and China does not, again, we still have 90% of investments coming from the US, from Switzerland, or from wherever.
Yeah.
No? So the presence, the share of China's of this growing, but again, it is still 10%. It is not 90%.
Yeah. Oh, in one of your reports, you said that the Latin American countries should coordinate in terms of Chinese investment.
Of course.
Yeah, but like you said, the president of Argentina, Milei, who is also an economist like you share the totally different opinions about this, right?
Well,
how can you coordinate?
Milei knows little of China. He knows, and he had a very strong ideological stance. We don't want to do anything with communists, and particularly not.
But he's very popular. He's very popular.
Yes, but he knows very little of China. And when he became president the first day, he said, well, what are we going to do with millions of tons of soya beans? Who's going to buy this? My friends in the United States, no, you know what, I export also. And Canada, no. And Latin America, no. You know what, my Chinese friends, I'm very sorry for what I said. It will never happen again. Let's continue being friends. And he forgot about the topic of not doing anything with communist China and other communists. No? So again, it shows and reflects little knowledge, little experience, little whatever. Exactly the same happened with Mr. Bolsonaro in Brazil.
Yeah.
We don't want to, and this Chinese and the debt trap and and who is going to buy your minerals and your energy? And
Soybean.
You know what? Sorry, my friends, it will never happen again. So he might be very libertarian and very whatever. Again, if China does not buy Argentinian minerals and lithium and etc., Argentina will be in a dramatic crisis. Dramatic crisis. No?
Are you calling President Milei ignorant?
Of course.
That's exactly what President Milei called President Obrador ignorant.
Well,
You're calling each other ignorant.
But based on facts.
Yeah.
I mean, my friend Milei, what happened with your grand strategy of getting rid of communists and particularly China?
Yeah.
He had to very silently say, sorry, my friends, and let's keep a long-term friendship and whatever, and please continue buying my soya bean. Lack of consistency based on knowledge. No?
Seems to me
Yes.
like Milei is still talking, bad things about China, about the system,
No,
that kind of
he has
system.
been very silent.
Okay.
He has not spoken of China in the
Yeah.
last months because he learned.
But he spoke about, what do you think of the economic system in China right now? Is it state capitalism or is it socialism?
I have been publishing a lot on that,
Yeah.
and neither nor. No, I think
Neither nor.
I think you have to understand the public sector in China. Some people have accused the Chinese government of being neoliberal, no?
Okay.
And some others accuse it of being a communist country, which is correct because according to the Chinese constitution, Article 1 says that China is a communist country.
And it's draconian control over everything.
Yes, well, you have a public sector in which the public sector, not the state, but the public sector has the property of 40% of China's GDP. No?
Yeah.
But this is how China is today. You might like it or not. This is how China works and has been able to compete with the US, with the European Union. No? There is in our working paper series, we have a very good, Loretta Napoleoni, an economist from Italy, a very provocative analysis saying, how do Chinese communists produce more competitive firms than the West? No? Mm-hmm. So it's not Soviet Union in the 1950s. It's a different public sector with surprisingly very competitive results.
Why is not the state capitalism?
Because state capitalism doesn't. I would invite you to go through my webpage,
sure.
and you
Of
will
course,
find a deep historical from Deng Xiaoping to Xi Jinping, a discussion regarding what is the public sector in China. The public sector in China it's not the state, so it's not state capitalism. And again, I'm describing an institution. I'm not saying good or bad, but I'm simply saying.
Yeah.
China, not Mexico, not the United States, not Australia or Germany, has a public sector, and the public sector is the sum of the central government. Yes, the central government is important, but also cities, municipalities, and provinces. The sum of that compete with each other. The city of Beijing competes with Shanghai, with Chongqing, with Guangzhou, whatever. They compete with each other under the coordination and leadership of the Communist Party of China. And this is a very unique institution, no? that has generated surprising results.
Okay.
It is not state capitalism like decades ago. No, it's another way of working with competition, but in which the Communist Party of China sets goals, developments, allows for discussions within the party, not outside of the party.
That's how you see the system.
If you
A free competition in the leadership.
No free competition. You have a discussion and you have a competition. But so if you say yes, it's state capitalism like I don't know, in Mexico under import substitution 70 years ago, doesn't have anything to do with it.
Okay. Yeah.
But look at some of the work we have been doing. No?
Yeah.
So I'm not saying good or bad. I'm not saying we have to copy and paste it. But if you don't understand this public sector, you cannot cooperate in terms of education, universities. You cannot attract tourism, no? etc., etc. You have to understand this public sector in China in terms of R&D, technology, computers, and whatever. And so from that perspective, again, if you are public or if you have private investments Huawei, no, I would say it's pretty irrelevant. You are highly linked to the public sector in China. No? This is how China works. And so Huawei receives subsidies from the Shenzhen government, from the Guangdong province, from Beijing central government, etc. So it's a very complex system that you cannot simply say, oh yes, it's state capitalism. That's useless.
You mentioned Confucius Institutes. I noticed that many universities in Mexico, including this one, has
Yes.
Confucius Institute.
Exactly.
But it's quite controversial in Australia. Australia literally just, they didn't ban, but due to national security concerns, there's strict scrutiny over the agreement between universities and China, because there's a serious concern that the Confucius Institute is not only teaching Chinese, it's teaching the values of the communist system.
Of the public sector in China, of course.
Yes.
And that's completely rational and normal. You have Goethe Institute from Germany, Alianzas Francesas from France and from the United States. They all depend on their public sector. And so you will have the political, the geographical, the cultural discussion of the public sector in Germany, in the United States and France. Normal.
Yeah. I know, but
That's it.
But something is different. For example, in China, there's no democracy. There's no freedom of press, freedom of speech. But in Mexico, in the United States, we do have, more or less, we do have those things. But what if the Confucius...
No, but no. That's, well, I again, the Goethe Institute represents the German government. You will not have discussions on leftist parties that exist in Germany or right-wing parties that exist in Germany. You will not have them in the Goethe Institute. And the same happens regarding discussions in the United States on immigration, on Mexican and Latin American immigration. It's a representation and reflection of the public sector of the United States. So, okay, if you don't want to have the Goethe Institute from Germany or from China, that's okay. I think it's a big mistake. You have to be very clear what is the Goethe Institute in Mexico. I know them very well. They are not far away from here. You can have specific discussions, and if you want to have additional discussions on Germany, you will have to go beyond the Goethe Institute, right? The same happens with China. If you want to discuss if Taiwan is part of China or not, you will not achieve this discussion in the Confucius Institute. You will have to go beyond that. But again, it's an important educational institution where you can learn the culture, the language, the history, etc., from the perspective of the public sector. You have to be very clear about that.
Do you think Confucius Institute is effective in that way, like
Yes.
culturally or educationally?
I hope we would have hundreds of Confucius Institutes, of course, yes. This is good for the exchange between Mexico and China in terms of language, of culture, of exchanges. They have the possibility that the best students go to China. Some people from China come to Mexico. Yes, you have to be very clear of the limits of this. This is an exchange and an institution of the public sector. If you want to discuss topics that are not allowed or are not discussed in China's public sector, you have to go to other institutions. That's it.
Because I've been talking with young people in Mexico.
Right.
They like Japanese animes, cartoons, Korean TV shows, but they don't know very few about China. Like China has no influence in them.
Little.
That's what I said. That is it effective to do the cultural exchange with
we
the
have-
constitution?
We have 6 Confucius Institutes. You cannot expect that they will have a dramatic and massive impact in Mexico's culture. And most of them exist for 10 years. The Goethe Institute in Mexico City exists for more than 60 years. So this is a slowly ongoing process. It's not the only cultural institution on China in Mexico. Our center works on China, but you have the Chinese embassy, you have other cultural institutions, so it's not the only one.
It's free competition.
I don't know if it is the most important one. I don't know, but I think it is relevant.
If the Chinese species become dominant, is that okay to you? Because
Dominant in which way?
in this puzzle,
What in which? But again,
that's what the United States are worried about. Like,
No, but dominant in regarding investments. Chinese investments in Latin America account for 10%. Dominant of what? I mean, the U.S. is discussing debt traps and be aware of China. You have to imagine the Latin American perspective. Latin America, and specifically Mexico, we have had dozens of debt traps in the last centuries. Dozens. Always with the United States. So, United States, please don't come up with your threat of China and the debt trap. The last one was in the 1980s.
1980s.
Debt trap with the United States. So that the United States tells me, be aware of the Chinese because of a debt trap, that makes me laugh. That's a joke, a bad joke, no?
Thank you very much for sharing with us all this
So
very different perspectives.
I hope you are tolerant to. I understand that, of course, in Australia you have the breadth of China, and it's a different perspective. But again, China here is very far away. What we witness for centuries is the breadth not of China but of the United States, no? Telling continuously Central America, Mexico, Argentina, behave. Otherwise, we will impose a government, we will send military, we will not give incentives, we will not invest. This is what has been going on for centuries. So that suddenly the United States are finding some competition in their backyard and saying, be aware of these guys are terrible. That's a bad joke for Latin Americans, a bad joke. No?
Do most Mexicans share the same sentiment? Like not anti-America, like America is being unfair to us sentiment with you?
I don't have a negative view of the United States. I studied in the United States. I know I go very often to the United States. But we have to be realistic. The big brother of Latin America or Mexico is the United States. And they impose and they say, Mexico, behave. No? And I want you not to do this. And Mexicans and Brazilians and Argentinians have to, you cannot close your eyes and say, I don't care. but you cannot follow blindly what the United States wants us to do. No, so it's a difficult relationship. No, a difficult. I mean, you have to imagine Mexico lost half of its territory to the United States.
Yeah,
That's not being negative.
You're still remembering it, still
Well,
piss off.
I believe in history.
Yeah,
if you don't believe in history, you are nothing. No?
Okay.
So be aware. No. When I go to China, people in China tell me, how is it possible that Mexican elites, you lost half of your country to the United States, and many elites in Mexico still believe that the most competitive, the most advanced country is the United States. You already lost half of your country. What are you waiting for? To lose your full country or what? So it's a complicated relationship.
What do they suggest? You take the land back?
No. That's out of the question.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
not the discussion. But you cannot simply say, oh no, I will forget about the chapter, and I will forget about the debt crisis in the 1980s, and I will forget. You cannot do that.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome.